The judge had just ruled in his favor. Cameras flashed, lawyers smiled, and my husband looked untouchable. Everyone thought the story was over. I did, too. But exactly 1 hour later, my phone vibrated. The doors swung open, and my brother walked in with a calm look that made my stomach drop. That was the moment everything began to fall apart. Before I tell you what happened next, do me a favor. If you believe truth always finds its way out, like this video and subscribe now. This isn't just a story about money or courtrooms. It's about betrayal, silence, and the moment I learned who was really standing beside me. Before everything broke, I was just a woman who believed in love more than power. I grew up in a home where respect mattered more than money and loyalty came before everything else. My family didn't have much, but we had each other. I was raised to speak with honesty, walk with pride, and never forget where I came from. I carried that with me into every room I entered, even the ones filled with people who saw me as less. When I met my husband, I didn't meet a billionaire. I met a man who made me feel seen. He listened when I spoke. He laughed easily. He told me my strength was beautiful, not intimidating. Back then, his success felt like something we were building together, not something that stood between us. I believed love could grow anywhere, even in places shaped by money and influence. Marriage changed the air around us. The world suddenly watched everything I did. Strangers judged my voice, my clothes, my confidence. I learned quickly that being a black woman beside a powerful man meant I had to be twice as graceful and half as loud. I smiled through uncomfortable comments and swallowed moments that didn't sit right, telling myself that love required patience. Behind closed doors, I started adjusting myself without realizing it. I softened my words. I ignored small hurts. I convinced myself that distance was just stress and silence was just exhaustion. I kept telling myself that strong women hold families together, even when it hurts. I didn't see that I was slowly disappearing to make room for his comfort. His family was polite in public but cold in private. I was welcomed but never fully accepted. I felt it in the pauses, in the looks, in the way conversations shifted when I entered the room. Still, I stayed kind. I stayed loyal. I stayed hopeful. I believed that if I loved hard enough, I would earn my place. Looking back now, I understand something I couldn't see then. I wasn't weak. I was trusting. I wasn't blind. I was hopeful. And before everything shattered, I truly believed that love, honesty, and commitment would be enough to protect me. From the outside, our marriage looked perfect. People saw the expensive homes, the quiet smiles, the way he held my hand in public like he was proud. Magazines called us a power couple. Strangers told me how lucky I was. What they never saw was how lonely it felt to stand beside someone who was slowly pulling away from me. At home, the warmth faded. Conversations became shorter. His phone was always face down. When I asked simple questions, I was told I was overthinking. When I shared my feelings, I was met with silence or impatience. I started choosing my words carefully, afraid that honesty would turn into another argument. Love began to feel like something I had to earn instead of something we shared. Money changed everything. Decisions were made without me. Plans were announced, not discussed. If I disagreed, I was reminded how much he carried on his shoulders, how stressful his world was. My opinions were treated like interruptions. Slowly, I learned that my role wasn't to question, but to support quietly, and I hated myself a little for accepting that. The control wasn't loud or obvious. It came wrapped in concern. He told me what was best for me, what was safe, what would look right. I let him choose for me more than I should have. I told myself it was partnership, but deep down, I knew it felt like erasing parts of myself to keep the peace. His family only made it worse. They smiled in public and judged in private. I felt their eyes on measuring, comparing, waiting for me to fail. I heard the whispers, the subtle insults dressed up as jokes. And every time I felt small, I reminded myself that I was his wife, that he would protect me. But he never did. The distance between us grew quietly. Nights passed without conversation. Laughter disappeared. Affection became rare and forced. I found myself missing the man I married while sharing a bed with a stranger. Still, I stayed. I told myself marriage wasn't supposed to be easy. I believed endurance meant strength. What I didn't understand then was that love should never make you feel invisible. And behind those closed doors, I was fading piece by piece while pretending everything was fine. I didn't catch him in a dramatic moment. No lipstick on a collar, no late-night confession. The betrayal came quietly, the way truth often does when it's been hiding too long. A message left open on a screen. A name I didn't recognize, but a tone I knew didn't belong to business. My chest tightened, not because I was surprised, but because something inside me had already known. When I asked him about it, he didn't panic. He didn't apologize. He smiled like I was being unreasonable. He told me I was imagining things, that I was tired, emotional, insecure. He said my doubts were hurting him. And somehow in that moment, I found myself apologizing for asking a question I had every right to ask. The truth came in pieces after that. Small details that didn't add up. Late nights that stretched into mornings. Sudden trips that made no sense. Familiar names showing up where they didn't belong. And the worst part wasn't just that he was cheating. It was who he was cheating with. Someone close enough to smile in my face. Someone who knew my home, my marriage, my silence. When I finally said the word out loud, cheating, he laughed. He called it a distraction. He said, "Powerful men live differently." He told me I should be grateful for the life I had instead of questioning it. That was the moment something cracked inside me. Not loudly, just enough to let the truth in. His family closed ranks immediately. I became the problem, the difficult wife, the one who couldn't handle pressure. They said I was trying to ruin him. They said I was jealous. They said I should stay quiet and be smart. I watched people I had broken bread with turn their backs on me without hesitation. I stopped sleeping. I stopped trusting my own instincts. Every time I felt hurt, I wondered if I was overreacting. Every time I cried, I wiped my tears before anyone could see. I felt alone in a marriage that had become a performance, trapped between a lie and the fear of what would happen if I spoke the truth. That betrayal didn't just break my heart. It shattered the version of myself that believed love would protect me. And once the truth was out, there was no going back. He didn't wait for me to heal or even process what I discovered. He moved fast, the way powerful people do when they want control. Lawyers called before conversations could happen. Papers arrived before apologies ever could. Suddenly, I wasn't a wife questioning betrayal. I was an obstacle that needed to be managed. The case wasn't about truth. It was about image. His team painted him as the calm, successful man under attack and me as the emotional woman trying to tear him down. Every feeling I expressed was labeled instability. Every question I asked was turned into accusation. I learned quickly that in rooms full of money, emotions are treated like weaknesses. He had the best attorneys. I had my voice and a few people who believed me. In court, facts were twisted gently, carefully until they no longer sounded like lies. Documents appeared that I had never seen before. Decisions were explained in ways that made it seem like I had agreed all along. I sat there listening to strangers define my marriage while I barely recognized the story they were telling. What hurt most was how small they tried to make me feel. They questioned my memory, my intentions, even my character. They brought up moments from our private life and framed them to suggest I was unstable, ungrateful, difficult. I wanted to scream, but I stayed quiet. I had learned that silence was safer than reaction. His family filled the courtroom with confidence. They nodded at the right moments. They avoided my eyes. It was clear where loyalty lived. I realized then that love meant nothing once power was threatened. I was never fighting just one man. I was fighting a system built to protect him. I was warned to settle, advised to stay quiet, reminded of everything I could lose if I pushed too hard. They spoke to me like fear was supposed to save me. Some days it almost worked. There were nights I cried until morning, wondering if telling the truth was worth the cost. But deep down something refused to break. I knew what I had lived. I knew what I had seen. And even as the courtroom leaned against me, I held on to one quiet belief. Power could control the room, but it couldn't erase the truth. The day of the verdict arrived heavy and quiet, like the air before a storm. I remember sitting there, hands folded, listening to my heart beat louder than every voice in the room. I told myself I was ready for whatever came next. But the truth is, nothing prepares you for the moment your life is decided by people who don't know your pain. When the decision was read, it didn't take long to understand what had happened. The words were polite, controlled, final. He had won. Not just the case, but the story. His lawyers smiled, his family relaxed. I felt something sink deep in my chest, a weight I wasn't sure I could carry. Cameras flashed as if nothing human had just been crushed. Reporters whispered his name like it meant something sacred. He stood tall, confident, already stepping into the role of the man who survived an attack. No one looked at me. And in that moment, I felt invisible in a way I never had before. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I sat still, staring straight ahead because I refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. Inside, though, everything hurt. I felt embarrassed for believing the truth would matter more than influence. I felt foolish for thinking love had ever protected me. Mostly, I felt tired. Tired of fighting, tired of explaining, tired of being misunderstood. As people filed out, congratulations filled the room. Laughter followed him like he had just accomplished something honorable. I gathered my things slowly, moving as if my body was heavier than before. Every step felt unreal, like I was walking through someone else's life. Outside, the world kept going. Cars passed. Phones rang. Life didn't pause for my loss. I realized then how alone I truly was in that moment. I thought the battle was over. I thought this was the end of my story. What I didn't know was that endings don't always look like silence. Sometimes they look like calm before something far louder. And exactly 1 hour later, everything I thought was finished was about to change. 1 hour after the verdict, the world around him looked different. The tension was gone from his shoulders. He moved like a man who believed nothing could touch him anymore. People spoke more freely, laughed louder, and acted as if the truth had officially been buried. I stayed quiet, sitting in the same silence I had learned to survive in. I watched faces change once they thought the fight was over. Smiles became careless. Words became sharper. There was no need to pretend anymore. I heard things said about me that no one would have dared to say earlier. Jokes, dismissive comments, a quiet celebration of my defeat. It hurt, but it also opened my eyes. This was who they had always been. I felt small, but not broken. There was a strange calm inside me. The kind that comes when you've already lost everything you were afraid of losing. I stopped trying to explain myself. I stopped hoping someone would step in. I accepted that sometimes justice doesn't arrive when you ask for it. Then something shifted. I didn't hear anger or shouting. I felt it before I saw it. A change in the air. Conversations stalled mid-sentence. Eyes turned toward the door. And there he was, my brother. Calm, grounded, unrushed. The same look he used to have when we were kids. And he knew something no one else did. He didn't greet anyone. He didn't raise his voice. He looked straight at me first, gave a small nod, and then turned his attention to the room. In that moment, I realized something important. He hadn't come to comfort me. He had come to finish something. My husband's confidence flickered just for a second. He tried to recover quickly, but I saw it. The certainty in his posture cracked. He asked what was going on, tried to keep control of the moment. My brother didn't answer right away. He said something down calmly, like time itself had slowed for him. No one understood yet, but I did. That quiet confidence told me everything I needed to know. The fight wasn't over. It had just changed direction. My brother finally spoke, and his voice was steady, not loud. He said he had stayed quiet on purpose, not because he didn't care, but because rushing truth into rooms like this only gives liars time to prepare. He looked at my husband and told him this wasn't about emotion anymore. It was about facts that had been hidden for a long time. He laid everything out slowly. Records that didn't match the story told in court, agreements signed in secret, money moved through places that were never mentioned. The kind of details you can't explain away with charm or confidence. I watched my husband's face change as each piece was revealed. The man who had just won everything was suddenly struggling to keep his balance. The affair was exposed next. Not rumors or screenshots, but dates, locations, and messages tied directly to decisions made during our marriage. The timeline spoke louder than any accusation ever could. It showed how carefully the truth had been managed, and how easily I had been painted as the problem while the real damage stayed hidden. The room grew quiet in a way I had never experienced before. Not awkward silence, fear. The kind that settles in when people realize the ground beneath them isn't solid anymore. Lawyers stopped whispering. Family members avoided each other's eyes. The celebration from earlier felt like a memory from another lifetime. My husband tried to interrupt to regain control, but it didn't work. For the first time, he wasn't leading the conversation. He was reacting. Every question he asked only opened the door wider to what had been concealed. Every excuse sounded weaker than the last. I didn't say much. I didn't need to. Watching the truth stand on its own was enough. All the things I had been accused of, being dramatic, being bitter, being unstable, fell apart without me defending myself. The proof spoke for me in a language power understands. When my brother finished, he looked at me again. Not with pride, not with pity, but with quiet certainty. In that moment, I understood something I would never forget. Silence isn't weakness when it's backed by truth. And the man who thought he had won had no idea what losing really looked like. The shift was slow, but undeniable. The same people who had laughed earlier now couldn't meet each other's eyes. Confidence drained from the room, replaced by tight smiles and nervous movements. My husband stood there silent, trying to understand how control had slipped from his hands so quickly. The man who had just been celebrated was now surrounded by questions he couldn't answer. His family, so loud before, suddenly had nothing to say. The looks they once gave me, the judgment, the quiet superiority, were gone. In their place was discomfort, fear. They realized they had backed the wrong version of the story. And for the first time, they understood that silence doesn't always mean defeat. I felt something unexpected rise inside me. Not joy, not revenge, relief. The kind that comes when you no longer have to prove your pain to anyone. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to accuse or explain. I simply spoke the truth I had carried alone for so long, calmly and clearly. Every word landed heavier than anger ever could. My husband tried to speak to regain control, but his words fell flat. The authority he once carried no longer worked. People interrupted him. They asked questions he wasn't prepared for. He looked around for support and found none. The power that once protected him had turned its back. I realized then how humiliation really works. It doesn't come from being exposed loudly. It comes from being seen clearly. The mask he had worn for so long was gone. And there was nothing impressive underneath it. Just a man who thought money could outpace truth. As for me, I stood taller without trying. The shame I had carried wasn't mine anymore. It never was. I saw myself reflected differently in the room. Not as the woman who lost, but as the woman who endured. And endurance, I learned, is a form of strength no courtroom can take away. When it was over, there were no cheers, no celebration, just silence. But this time, the silence wasn't aimed at me. It followed him. And that was the moment I understood something deeply. The story they tried to write about me had collapsed. And in its place stood the truth. Unapologetic, undeniable, and finally free. After everything settled, The noise slowly faded, but the consequences didn't. I won't go into details, but once truth is exposed, it doesn't disappear quietly. Questions followed, doors closed, deals paused. The image he worked so hard to protect began to crack in places no amount of money could repair. Reputation, I learned, is fragile when it's built on lies. As for me, I walked away without anger. I didn't chase revenge or wait for apologies that would never be sincere. I chose peace. For the first time in a long while, I felt light, free. Winning didn't mean watching him fall. It meant reclaiming myself without bitterness weighing me down. My brother never asked for credit. He never needed applause. His loyalty spoke louder than words ever could. He reminded me that real strength doesn't announce itself. It shows up quietly, stands firm, and leaves when the job is done. In him, I saw the family bond one had nearly forgotten. One rooted in protection, not power. My family came back together in a way that felt healing. No wealth, no titles, just people who loved me without conditions. That grounded me more than any courtroom victory ever could. I realized then that I hadn't lost a marriage. I had escaped a lie. If you're listening to this and you feel overlooked, silenced, or doubted, hear me clearly. Silence is not weakness. Sometimes it's strategy. Sometimes it's survival. And sometimes it's strength waiting for the right moment to speak. Know your worth even when others try to define it for you. Trust your instincts even when powerful voices try to drown them out. And never forget who stands behind you when everything else falls away. Now I want to hear from you. What would you have done in my place? Leave a comment and share your thoughts. If you believe truth always finds its way to the surface. Like this video and subscribe for more powerful real-life stories that remind us all you are never as alone as they want you to.